Hi, good evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real People, Real Stories. This evening and afternoon, coming in from New Zealand, I am so excited to have special guest Sue Gaskell. Sue and I met on Facebook. She's been a member of my community for some time, and recently she commented on one of my posts in the last couple of weeks. And in that moment, I responded to her through a private message. And I said, Sue, we need to have a conversation. And within a matter of hours, I think we were having a video chat on the same day. I believe it may have been almost a week ago, Saturday. You were out doing errands. Now, of course, it is Saturday for you. It is Saturday. I believe it's about 2 p.m. in New Zealand. And I am so excited to have you. I think you may be my second guest coming in from the beautiful country of New Zealand. So welcome to the studio, Sue.
Thank you.
Sue, what I'd like to do is invite you to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and start to share some of your backstory while I share out our live stream on some of the different channels that we are connected with. So welcome to the show, and nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, my given name is Sue, and everything else is not who I am, it's what I do. I live my life from my loving heart and the essence of the soul of who I am. If that's a lot to take in, then it's really worth listening to. I'm one of 11 children, the youngest girl, one younger brother. Brought up, I'm now 73, so brought up very, very tough times with parents who worked incredibly hard. And I became an orphan by the time I was 19. And I'm married, 3 lovely children, 11 grandchildren, and had a successful business. And unfortunately, as things happen, had to learn the hard way by my mistake and lost everything. Most of all, I was hurt because it was friends. And these stories we've all got. Now at 73, been widowed twice, I have reframed my life, and been doing lives for many years. Doing it for nothing, passing back what I knew. Now, in the foreseeable future, I'm going back to work. What does that mean? It means that I've got another qualification on top of a life coaching one. I have international peer support training. I also have gone back to university. I once went when I was 40 to gain a qualification in counselling. And I've got some more skills on the computer. So I'm going to leave it there, and hopefully Jay will interject and we'll be able to learn a little bit more. And the most important thing is you're here for yourself. Anything I talk about is not from ego, not exaggerated. It's talking from my heart, from experiences, which are far more important than anything that I know. So I'm talking just to you. Imagine it's your life experiences. Open your heart, open your mind, and let's see what happens.
One of the things that stood out to me when we had our conversation was I asked you, where did things start to go awry for you in your earlier years? And you had mentioned very openly that one of the challenges that you faced earlier in your life was that you had an eating disorder. And I asked you volunteered to share how that actually began for you. And so I'd like to invite you to perhaps share a little bit of that backstory, because I think it's important for women, especially, as well as men, to understand that it doesn't always have to be such a profound experience or trauma that leads us to some type of eating disorder, but it could just be something as simple has a few words spoken.
Absolutely. And when I was 21, I had my second child. I had no issues around weight or food. I didn't feel guilty about how I looked. And yes, I'd eaten a bit more and I'd put a little bit of weight on. It wasn't overly much. I had my second child, a lovely girl, Mandy. And one of those at home parties where family and friends come along, as it was back then. And one of my sisters, the only one who had never been able to have children, she knocked at my door and I was so excited. The first thing she said, Jay, was, Susan, haven't you put weight on? Well, the next day when I woke up, I thought there was something wrong with me because they teased me all night and I just laughed. Actually, I was really hurt and it hit me psychologically like a bolt. And that was the first day of 30 odd years of having an issue with food. A named issue was bulimia. And the day I found out the name for what I was doing was when our lovely Princess Di came on the national news and told us that she was bulimic. And I just sat and cried. I'm going cold or warm, tingling, just telling you. So anorexia, bulimia, and eating disorder, which is my first book, by the way, called Eating Your Words. I was literally eating the words that my sister had said to me, hadn't realized until way down the track.
How did you navigate through this disorder that you had, and I presume at this age you have healed from the disorder?
Absolutely. I expected that question, and it must be 30 years. So I've really done a great job. 25, 30 years. How did I recover from it? It gets a deeper story. Because again, I promise I tell the truth. And a lot of people won't like the truth because they're trying to hide from it. And the truth is, I had got a little job when my 3 children were at preschool or school. And I became a slimming group leader. I'd lost that weight on my own. I was absolutely wonderful. There was no such thing as calories then. There was no such things. It was all hit and miss. And so I had thousands of people, Jay, coming to me to lose weight when I became bulimic. I'd like to explain. I became bulimic after running 3 clubs a week for many years. And I used to take a visual aid. A visual aid was as calories came into book form, going on with my story, I'd take in a 3-course meal and put a Mars bar at the side of it and say, you can have this, and it's got the same calories in as the Mars bar. Then when it came to the end of the week, I'd go home and eat my visual aid, which was the Mars bar, not the 3-course meal. I'd have a treat on Thursday, as most of us did back then. And then I felt so sick that I actually was sick. And it was just like an idea came into my head. And that idea set a seed that over a period of months, I started making myself sick. And many people in the slimming industry, a huge amount of the group leaders I worked with before I had my own company, all of them, models do, jockeys, and there's no crime. The person we're hurting is ourselves, and we need to look at what this form of self-abuse is about.
How did you break the cycle? What type of work did you have to do to break the cycle of the eating disorder?
Okay, bulimia it was called then, as I then found out, and because Princess Di had owned up to it, and because I'd met her, she's a wonderful lady, was a wonderful lady, she's still with us. I said to myself, if she has the courage to tell the world, then so do I. And I had an article in a local magazine sharing shameful secrets. And I went on a television program very innocently. And another little story, because it's all relevant. I went on a show that's long since finished, very popular in Derby. I was a celebrity in Derby. I did a lot of television work, radio work. I was in the magazines, I was in the newspaper. And I went on this show, and one of my members came with me. So we go down to London on the train, we sit where we need to be, and there's people there that are going to be interviewed like me with guilty secrets. Next to me was my member that was going to speak after I'd said my piece, and then the audience participated. Well, my member wasn't comfortable and she had to move. So somebody else sat in her spot. And don't forget, nobody knew about this. So I'd said what I'd said. The interviewer, who could have been you, said what he said and went to my member, who was going to say, nobody knew. It never hurt any of Sue's members. The only person that was struggling was Sue, and we didn't know. Who was sat next to me was a Weight Watchers group leader, and she slated me. The humiliation was unbelievable. And when I was off the hook now, and there was somebody there who had pretended to be a doctor and was doing operations, right? And so I just made one simple comment 20 minutes later. And the interviewer, you see, I'm not mentioning names because I don't blame. I want to talk about that later on as well. I went up and found him afterwards with all his, men around him. And I said, may I have a word? And he said, yes. I said, the comment you made, which was humiliating and ridiculous and sarcastic to me, saying, you think you can give anybody advice? Would you mind taking that out of the show? It's hard enough that it's gone out live. And this has been a really hard experience. And to his credit, he did. That's never left me, never left me. And thank you for that pause, because this is something that you, as a listener, if you've got anything in your life that's not working, ask yourself, when you feel humiliation or a sense of embarrassment as an adult, ask yourself this question: how old do I feel? Now, if you ask yourself that question and you listen carefully to the answer and nothing comes, write the question in your good handwriting. Now transfer the pen from that hand to the other and write the answer. And because it's difficult to write with your other hand, you'll cut out your middle mind and you'll get to the child a bit quicker. So your inner child is work I do. And you need to find out how old you feel as an adult when you feel embarrassed or humiliated, because that's a route that you need to resolve in order to move forward.
I love you, Sue. Wow, you nailed it. Mary Kelly is in our community right now. I want to take a moment just to welcome those that I do see. Kimberly Coons, hopefully I got your last name pronounced Pino. Pino, I'm not sure where you're coming in from. If you're coming in from anywhere outside of Arizona, where I live, let us know. Drop a note in the comment. Love to know where you're coming in from so that we could welcome you into the community this evening. Debbie Garcia is, in fact, one of the co-founders of Spirituality Gone Wild. Debbie's coming in from the San Diego area. Welcome to the show this evening. Mary Kelly said, boom, you got that. That's the work I do, is as a transformational coach with my clients today, the inner child work is where it all, I believe, begins and ends. Because once we heal those wounds, those shadows that we've been holding on to unconsciously, our adult life, behaving as an adult child, just surviving, not aware that we have so many moments and wounds and experiences that we think that they're gone because we're older, but they're under the surface and causing all kinds of internal confusion and pain and havoc in our life. And then, of course, ego, our own ego, our beautiful part of our being, has figured out how to protect us to his or her best ability. And so ego starts to drive the car. And before we know it, we wake up. Some of us do, and some unfortunately don't. I woke up when I was 54 and realized that my life was out of control. And I had to be willing to rebirth and face those shadows from my inner child that was still very prevalent. And so I love when you talked about the pause, and it gives you a chance to really ask yourself, because you've done enough of the practice for yourself, how old are you feeling? And so when we were in that conversation, that segment, how old were you feeling?
Probably about 6 or 7. Unfortunately, and I'm not a victim, I'm not a survivor, we can talk about that hopefully. Unfortunately, that's how it was back then. So there's no blame or guilt apportioned to anyone. And I was in class once again, another Dicko. My first name was Dickinson, Susan Dickinson. So I followed my sister, and my sister got into a bit of mischief, nothing awful, Betty, my lovely sister. And so I would go into a class and nobody saw me, they just saw my sister or my name. And so the humiliation was rife. I'll share one story. I don't mind sharing any. I'm just aware, though, just one story. If you, the listener, are going into your childhood, asking yourself the question, how old would I feel if something happened to me? Is there something? Jay has a safe place where we can just own it. And so I was in class. I'd put my hand up because I've been an enthusiastic, curious child, and I wasn't answered. And I put my hand up because I wanted to go to the loo. And then eventually I said, please, miss, what do you want? I need to go to the toilet. Oh, go then. And I'm walking along, wetting my knickers in front of the whole class. So that was one of many experiences. And I've never, ever, ever told anybody this, certainly not on camera. And I'm strong enough and wise enough to be able to do it. I've been so upset by thinking I might wet my knickers because I needed to go the other way as well, that when I got there, I'd made a mess in my pants. So there I am, this little girl, dirty pants, wet and soiled. And the only thing I'd got was a rain mat because it had been raining. You'll never guess what I did. I wrapped my pants in the rain mat and hid it behind the toilets, right behind where nobody could see it. You see, I'm not crying because it's resolved, because I have compassion for my little girl. I'm able to tell you, and the definition of being through it and over it is when you can speak and have compassion for yourself. And then remember, please, anyone that this rings a bell, there's plenty of help in so many ways. And like with Princess Di, I owned the truth. There was something I needed to do. I needed to look after me. So I go back to, with my eating disorder, that's about abuse as a child, more than once. I don't say it blasely. My innocence was taken when I was 5 years of age without anybody touching me. So there you go.
I'd like to ask you, when you go through the exercise of asking yourself, how old am I feeling right now? What is the purpose of that? And then what do we do once we identify, for example, you identified you were about 6 years old or 5 years old. But if we were, let's say, in a coaching session together and you were coaching the client and a client said that I'm feeling about 5 or 6 right now. Now, what do we do with that? How do we navigate from feeling 5 or 6 to eventually being able to heal the wound? What does that look like?
Okay. Because I've supported, not helped. That's another thing you have to overcome. Helping people is about you, not them. It's about both. So I've supported people. And when I ask that question, there's just something I know. I see a look in somebody's eyes. It's in a flash. And I know that we're nearly there with the child. So what does that look like? I'll say to that person, so how old do you feel? And they'll say, got it. And I'll say, are you happy? And if they say yes, I'll say, okay, now find another memory, because it's a memory where you're not happy. And then we can pinpoint roughly what age. So I said, okay, so what happened then? Because I'm non-judgmental, I'm supportive, and I have great heart listening ears. And if the person is ready, then it's like opening a wound that's got pus all around it, and the tears flow, and then out comes all of that upset, that hurt, how they felt then, and I nurture their damaged child, and they go away from me knowing how to look after their inner child themselves.
Beautiful. I love that. So if I may paraphrase what I just heard,
Yep.
The intention is for us to learn how to parent ourselves. Because if we have a wound, for example, I have a wound, let's say from when I'm 8 years old, and if I haven't, as an adult, been aware that the wound is there, but it keeps coming to the surface like a scab that never heals, because every time I get triggered by something that I hear on TV or something that somebody says to me or something I may read, in a moment, I'm right back to being that 8-year-old boy, the little JJ, okay? And so in that moment, I've waited unknowingly, unconsciously, a lifetime. I've waited for somebody, a parent, a mom, perhaps a dad, to parent me, to give me comfort, to let me know I'm okay, to protect me, to love me, to nourish me, to nurture me. And as an adult, millions, if not billions of us are still waiting for that parent to show up and protect us and love us. And here's what I've learned in my own healing journey, which I share today as a coach, is that it's no longer my mom's responsibility, who is still alive. She's 83 years old, and it's something, I'm okay given my mom's age. I don't know if she is. I know she never was. She was very vain as a younger woman. I don't know if she still is today. Mom, if you are, I know you're not watching this live, but you'll let me know. I'm sure of that. But it's not my mom's responsibility to take care of me anymore. It's not anyone's. It's not my ex-wife's. It's not my fiance's. It's not even my children's. That's my responsibility today, is to learn how to nurture and love and respect my little boy that's still alive inside, that has needs, just like I do as the adult. And so it's a powerful tool of healing that that works when we work it.
Interesting word you said, which was triggers off a feeling. I'm a peer support trained. That's an international qualification. And what that means is it just validates what I'm doing anyway. Because when we trigger something, we did this as an exercise, and it triggers off a gun or fear. Now, change the word, each of you, to activate a feeling. Now, you're not going to be in that place of fear. You're in a place, a space where you have a choice. So try and see that activate something is healthier than trigger. And it's quite a new concept, and it really has changed my perspective on my activation. The other thing is when your psychological memory and mine, everything you said is absolutely true, is activated, and the memory from the child needs healing. And quite rightly, as you say, we are responsible for our own healing. By the same token, when people come to me and I start them on that journey, and it's the greatest privilege to do that, then I nurture their damaged child, because they don't need to hear it from their mum or dad who hadn't got the love in them to be able to pass it on. They just did what they'd learned. And we're breaking the cycle, which is wonderful. So I can nurture that damaged child. I can then give her or him the tools to understand about taking that child everywhere, because at that stage, information may or may not be with each of the viewers. And that is, we have a child, we're the adult, and we have a parent. I had one lesson with someone on this decades ago, and she said, you don't need to come again because you are so advanced. And I feel really chuffed telling you that when I had such a low self-esteem. So I went and bought the book. The child is the psychological, feeling, emotional side. The parent is our ego, our conditioning, and ego is needed, automatic pilot, because that's how we have learned to do this and smile and see that it's okay. So it's the ego that's damaged that then behaves in a way to cover up the hurt. And that's what we're all doing. We drink, we smoke, we people please, we gamble. And every time we get near that activation of a feeling, that if we could bring it to the surface and just love ourselves through it, accept, 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 what we do is we run off. We run a mile from being known, from true intimacy, which is the heart and the essence of who we are.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Cindy says, if I may, Cindy, she says, is it possible to not remember an incident and still be activated and feel the pain?
In my experience, and I'm talking from a lot of people, thousands over the years, 100% yes. And again, I share an experience to parallel that. And that is when I was a little girl. So thank you for the question, a great question. I was a little girl, went round to my friend's house, and my friend was a bit strange. I didn't know why, I do now. And her dad was sat in the corner, and I'd gone round. I'd felt great that he'd invited me in, because one of a big family, people don't want you round. Anyway, he was looking at me in a certain way. And as a little girl, I knew the way he was looking at me wasn't okay. So moving on, I mean, I learned to look after myself. I didn't stay. And then I went into therapy in 1991 and asked the question, can somebody abuse me sexually without touching me? And the psychologist, the consultant, said yes. So that's answering that, not just from me or my experiences, it's from a qualified person who actually, that was the first day that I began to realize the abuse that I'd had on my body. And the same with, what did you say, Cindy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes is the answer.
So to piggyback your experience, Sue, Cindy, I don't think that we have to remember the incident. I think what's important, the important takeaway from this conversation in this moment is that once we are aware that we've been activated to something that where our emotions are out of control, or we feel hurt, we feel sad, we feel anger, whatever emotion has kind of been activated, if we take just long enough to pause and go inward instead of reacting outward and ask ourselves, why did I just, why am I feeling this way in this moment? Who's showing up? How old am I feeling? And when we go through that exercise, as Sue just described to us, asking ourselves, how old am I feeling right now? Okay, I'm about 7 years old. I'm about 50, whatever that age is. Most likely, it's going to be an age from the younger years of our life, from our childhood years. And in that moment, then what I get to do is show up as my parent self and parent that little boy and ask JJ, what do you need from me right now? You're upset. I want to acknowledge you and I want to honor you. And it may be I have to ask him, do you just need a hug? Do you just need me to want you just want me to hold space for you? Do you want to go for a walk and get out of this environment? We can. Are you tired? You just we'll set an alarm for 30 minutes. Let's take a cat nap. I'll hold you. And we'll get under the blanket. And let's just close our eyes. Maybe we meditate. Maybe you're bored. Maybe we just put on music and help get you out of this moment. Let's put on some music and dance or sing, whatever it is. Let's get out in nature. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a bike ride. There's all these different questions that we can ask ourselves. What is it that you need in that moment, in this moment, that can, as the adult self, we can parent with love, with no judgment, no conditions, unconditional love to ourselves, and give our inner child what she and he have always needed, which is just us.
Absolutely lovely. Beautifully said. And we don't necessarily remember things because we don't want to, because we don't have to go through that painful experience, because it was painful. And our intuition, which is our common sense, which isn't so common anymore, our common sense comes to the fore. And if we know about looking after our inner child, then we can do that and nurture by nature. And sometimes if you feel safe enough within yourself, you can then look at, well, was it a fearful experience? You could risk asking yourself that, because the opposite in the human condition is love and hate. The opposite in our essence spiritually is love and fear. So if we've been brought up on fear-based love, then we're fearful because that's what we learned. As you learn to love yourself, it opens up another door that you can actually sometimes say, I'm going to remember because I get it now, and it's never going to hurt me. So I can deal with it because you've nurtured yourself. And nurturing yourself is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to people around you. And the hardest thing of all, heavens, the experiences. If mum or dad didn't tell you they loved you, it's how it was back then for the main. My dad told me he loved me, never. He told me he loved me because of the way he acted. Love is an action, it's not just a word. People have love language. If you buy me something, I'll feel that I'm loved. If you clean the house for me, that makes me feel loved. That's my love language. And we're all different. And from a conversation, again, these are little nuggets, think about them, from a dear friend of a long standing. We were having a conversation overseas this morning. And there was a little window when she was talking. And I said, can I just say something? And if you don't want to hear it, then that's your choice. She said, yes, go on. I said to her, when you didn't feel that people were caring about you in this day and age, our children and grandchildren and so on, I want you to just readdress that. It's not that they're not caring about you. They don't have the same love language. So if they don't say, do you want to stay for tea? And you could say no quite easily. They don't understand that it's because we haven't got the choice, and therefore we feel rejected and abandoned because that's how it felt. We weren't told we'd done something naughty when we were little. We were dirty. We were rude. We were awful. And so that's why we personalize things, and we really have to learn how. It's simple, life is. It's not easy to learn new skills. Learn how to reframe and change the language that we talk. If we talk in fearful language, we feed in our fears. If we talk in loving language, we feed in the unconditional love.
Thank you for sharing that, Sue. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what is love.
Lovely question. Lovely question. There's so many man-made perceptions of love. I love you, Jay, because you've asked me on the show. I said I'd love to come on. There's an exchange, and that's conditional. That's conditional. And most loves in the human condition are conditional. As human beings, we were brought up on it. So to me, love is an action. Love is knowing that you and I, of course, we're doing this because we want to share and pass on what we know. We don't want people to suffer a second longer if they can start their journey to find this unconditional love for themselves. And the most important thing about love is it's nothing that you can touch. It touches you, it touches your heart, and it touches the essence of the being that we are. When we came to this earth, we're planted in the womb, we started growing. And that pure unconditional love is the soul, the essence of who we are. We pop out, and the second we're born, people start telling us how to be. Whereas if we looked into the face of a baby, and that they could teach us far more than we could ever know. So we have to then shed that new idea of love, which we were taught in the man-made condition, like a snake, shed the skin, come out of the ego to this place and space where there's a crack. There's a crack in the way your ego, self-inflated image thinks and talks and feels. And then you can take this step over into the unknown, which, do you know, it's not fearful at all. It's the most exciting thing. And it starts with unconditional love for yourself. And that's when you can share that with other people. Not until.
If you grew up in a home where you have whomever's raising you, whether it be a mom or dad or both, even a grandparent, if they are lacking love of self, and so they're living in ego space, just surviving, raising you, for many of us, love is pain. Because if you think about it, it just makes so much sense. In one moment, your mom is screaming and yelling at you because you accidentally knocked over a cup of water. And she's lost control in that moment. Instead of handling it a different way, she chose to lose control.
Yep.
And how she reacts to you as that little girl basically is an imprint. She's tattooed you with something I refer to as cellular memory. Well, an hour later, she's calmed down, or maybe it's 10 hours later, just somewhere in between. And she says to you, I love you. It becomes very confusing for a child who grows up in a home with a parent that is struggling, is suffering, is themselves in pain, just surviving and doing the best they can, but teaching us their definition of love. It becomes very confusing for the child unconsciously.
Yeah.
We are aware. And so if we had that type of experience, and now fast forward, now we're an adult, how do we learn how to come home? How do we learn how to come home to ourselves? How do we learn how we hear the word self-love? It's being used a lot today in this world of spirituality and other places, perhaps. How do we get there if we weren't taught by somebody else, like a parent?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. I'm happy to give my contribution to it. My mum was she had one sister. See, it's all back in history, our emotional history. Mum had one sister, and they came from a very well-to-do family. My dad came from a rough family. His dad used to knock them all about and belt them, and it was tough. And I learned this from my elder brother, Phil. And so my dad made sure he'd have my mum joined to dad. You see, off he went, he was going to get his woman, and he made her pregnant. So in those days, you had to get married. My mum didn't know how to wash and cook and clean. She was innocent. She had been nurtured, and she was thrown into this environment. She had 11 children. That's a lot of children. And they never left us. They worked diligent and hard. And some of their behavior, when I look back, um, I can see, we can see in hindsight. My dad collapsed on me when I was 15. My mum was hysterical. And I went off in the night to find my sister in the dark, terrified, on a bike, not knowing where I was going, wanting to help my dad. He was my rock. Got home and he died 4 hours later. And as a consequence, I left home, was beaten up. I wasn't old enough to understand that my mum was hurting. She, she just did what she could. She'd never been allowed out to work. And then sadly, we didn't know she got cancer and died when I had a 3-month-old baby when I was 19. So you look at the story. How do you break the cycle, I believe, is the track we're on. Well, I married at 17, lost a baby, had a baby, and at 19, one child, at 20, 21, pregnant or ready to deliver. And then I had a third child. I was still a child myself. And so I absolutely own the truth that I made some real mistakes. I made lots of great choices, and some were not so good. And it was tough. It was tough on my children because I was such a perfect mum, had a perfect family, and they were so good because there daren't be any other. And I think that's a really hard thing for me to own and know and understand that they will have to go through their journey. The question is, how did they do that? They've got to be prepared to want to understand why their parents did what they did. It might go to the grandparents. They then have to have the courage. I have the courage if they want to talk about it. And at that stage, I have broken the cycle. I've gone into therapy and I've written avidly. I've said things, I've shared with them. If they're not ready, it's not going to happen. And so all you can do is love yourself unconditionally. Never ever make the same mistake again. When you know what irrational guilt is, irrational fear, insecurity, what you know that you've passed on, that's done. What you have to learn is a new language, not blame, shame, guilt, control, punishment born out of fear. And I have experiences of people in families, and you notice I never mention names. I don't blame myself any longer. Everything used to be my fault. Everything. I mean, everything. And I know I still have people that won't speak to me because of something they're still hanging on to from when we were growing up or at school or indeed our own children. And I love them unconditionally. They don't know me. They only know what they remember and hang on to that resentment because it suits them instead of taking responsibility, as you quite rightly said. They've been away from me a lot longer than they were with me. And they have some beautiful, they're lovely, all of them. My brothers, my sisters, my children, they've all done well. Um, they have to take responsibility. Hanging on to guilt is a killer within the self. Life is very simple.
Excuse me?
Life is very simple. It's easy to talk. You have to put it into practice.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've been on a tear lately, conveying that in at least in the United States, there's this belief system that we believe, generally speaking, that knowledge is power. And I challenge that today. I don't believe that that's accurate. I believe that knowledge is knowledge. Action is power. Without action, we just know, but we're not doing anything to change. We're not doing anything to improve. We're not doing anything to step through fear to break through to freedom. Action is where the power is. Action is where the real courage is. Um, there's so many one-liners that we're taught that we were raised with. Sometimes there's some things that I hear now that it's like, wow, I haven't heard that one in decades. But you said something the other day on one of your lives. I watched one of your lives. You come on live quite often. You do. You have a website called Sue's University of Life.nz. And I'm going to put it on a banner across so people can find you. They also could find you on Facebook as well. But where I was going with this is the other day on your live, you talked about death, dying and living. And I'd like you to share that one liner that it was so profound. And that's what I love about you, Sue, is that you have tremendous wisdom because you have walked through a lot of your own darkness. Would you mind sharing what you shared in your 5 or 6 minute clip the other day about death and living? You recall what I'm talking about, right? We talked about it before today's show.
Yes. A lot of people say you only live once. Well, that's inaccurate. You only die once. You live every day you're breathing. And that to me is a great way to put this platform within the self, something to stand on, and your belief system around spirituality. Another one of mine is, may love be your constant companion and wisdom be your guide. And I say that to embrace all of us because everybody has their own religious belief or spiritual, and everyone thinks they're right, Jay. Well, I don't do right, wrong, good, bad, blame, shame. I do none of that. So I do not put myself in a box. And so I change the word God. And when people say to me, oh, it's rubbish, it's all in your head, all of you, and I say, oh, that's okay, because I never argue. I just listen and maybe share. And I'll say, so if you don't believe in God, do you believe in love? And they say, yeah, yeah. And I'll say, well, put love in my hand. Can't. I said, no more can I help you to understand that there's something bigger than me and you, that we're all in this together. And I said, if you don't believe in God, which is a very overused word, It's used it's really overused. And I just said to this same person, just put an extra O in it, believe in God, because I know Jesus walked this earth. And I know that he did good things, and he wanted us to have choices and to love ourselves and then each other. And if you can follow that philosophy in life, how could we ever do anything other than to enjoy and experience this wonderful miracle called life?
Beautiful. Beautiful. So we are coming up just shy of the hour. We got about 10 minutes till we are in the hour. I'd like to, well, first of all, if I may ask, how are you feeling right now? Now that we've got about 50 minutes of our conversation is behind us, it's not in front of us. Although there's probably 5 hours in front of us. If we wanted to stay live, we could, because I've got a whole slew of topics that just are on my mind and in my heart space right now that I'm itching to go there with you. But I'd like to just do a check-in and ask you, how are you doing right now? How do you feel?
In this moment, if you can see my face, it's quite red. Now, that's because I'm passionate. I'm passionate about what we're talking about. I'm so happy. And what makes me happy is I know who I am. I'm authentic. I know what I've learned and what I would love other people to learn if they're ready. I feel that we've achieved so much between us and by the questions asked. And it's an absolute privilege to be in the company of like-minded people. And like-minded people learn about love, not fear, love. So I feel so at one with myself. The happiness that we're looking outside of ourselves to find, whether it's a car or a house or that perfect lady or perfect man, it's not going to happen. Michael Singer is a fabulous guy to listen to on YouTube. Michael Singer talks about what is happiness, and I think you'd benefit enormously by looking at it. I think if I can put one thing over, it is that you do have low days. A low day just means that. It doesn't mean you're depressed. I've been there. I've tried to kill myself. I've done all those things. I wanted the pain to stop. How do I feel? Empowered. Empowered because I know that between us, one person, it will have resonated with. And changing lives when people are ready with love and respect. And if people aren't ready, loving them anyway, because we've been where they are, they just haven't been where we are. So totally, utterly okay. I'd love to return the question.
Is that what you just done? Have you returned the question to me, asking me how I'm feeling right now? Well, if you could tell by the look on my face, if you could read a smile,
Yeah.
I love the work that I do today. I love bringing people forward that have a story to share. Real people, real stories, real men, real talk, real people, real health. All 3 platforms. You know, I've got 3 children, and it just struck me now. I love them all. They're very different from one another.
Yes.
And they're all at a different space in their journey called life. But each one of them has a place in my heart. My heart is big enough to have love for my children and love for people that I just meet in a moment, as well as people that I've known for decades. I also have launched this year in totality, we got 3 platforms, 3 shows. And I love each show and what each show's message is for different reasons, just like my children. They're different. But what is the same, is that it's about people. It's about who we are. It's about our truth. It's about our knowing. And that's why I do the work I do, because it brings me joy that I lacked for 54 years of my life. I was so busy in my head trying to figure out my next move in my life, how to make the next dollar, how to save people I cared about, um, how to be happy, how to find happiness. And I didn't know how to experience what I experienced today. And this happens because I hit such a bottom, as we all have in our life, different levels, that I had to be willing to give up everything that I had, everything that I thought was the truth, to basically rebirth, start over. Because I knew who I had become, but I didn't know who I was. I lost myself in my life. And today, doing this work, doing these shows, meeting people like you, Sue, is the greatest gift for myself that I get to then share with others. And it's about inspiring others that through courage, through taking action steps, through willingness to surrender our old belief systems, and to really peel back and open up. Peel back and open up. I don't mean to have my fists open, because that's not what I'm talking about. Peel back and open up and get to really learn who you are at your heart space, at your soul space, and discover. And through that process, we may not have a lot on the outside, but we have everything that we need on the inside.
Absolutely.
And so I love having conversations like we had tonight. And what I'd like to do is, no doubt, I'd like to have you back in the studio again, because there are a plethora of topics that I'd like to deep dive in with you and continue the conversation. One that's standing out for me in this moment, that's coming from right within, is I really want to deep dive and chat a little bit about codependency.
Yeah.
You mentioned people pleasing. I suspect that you may have a backstory in regards to maybe a time in your life where you were engaged um, in that hurtful behavior for yourself and for others, as had I experienced for most of my life. And so, with what time we do have left, Sue, I'd like to invite you to maybe put some closing thoughts, put a pretty bow on the show tonight, and share some closing thoughts with maybe one person that's listening live or on replay, that's ready to hear what you have to say.
Okay. To begin with, this is something I've forgotten about. You see, that's how little I do for me in terms of self-pushing. That's my book. It's on the website.
What's the name of the book?
It's called Eating Your Words by Sue Gaskell. It's on Amazon. And to share with somebody about eating and eating problems, and I know things about people that don't know about themselves, which is a curse and a blessing. So I can see instantly if somebody's been abused or if they have a problem. So Eating Your Words is just about experiences. People say it's a real read, and there's some things at the back that they could follow. Now, I am saying my book because I'm allowed. What I'm trying to say as a parting gift to anybody: are you an all or nothing eater or drinker, or any habits that you have? Do you have to have just one and you don't know how to stop? then I can support you and help you. We can have that as a conversation. Self-esteem. What does your self-esteem look like if you didn't have any family? What would your self-esteem look like if you had to work from day to day to just feed yourself? So that's another area. The new language of love, other than the blame shame, getting rid of the shouldn'ts, the can'ts, the won'ts. I've created a whole new language. That's something else. And for that person, that one person that's listening to this, thinking that there's no hope for you, there is. If you feel lonely, there's lots of loneliness, as I understand. If you're a little bit older and your choices have been taken away, let me be your inspiration. I'm 73 years of age. I've reformed, reframed, and I'm going out to work next year. I'm hoping to get paid for what I do. I know I deserve it. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't give up on yourself. So join me on YouTube, Facebook, all free, Pop and see on the website. And this man who gives us these shows, Jay, he's an inspiration. So be inspired by either of us and the people that come, because we just want what's best for you. And it isn't our job to do it, it's yours. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sue Gaskell, for coming in this evening. I know it's your Saturday. You gave up part of your day to spend with me and those that are watching. I'd like to thank and acknowledge those that are watching us live or catch us on replay. Without you, we wouldn't have a reason to show up and have the conversation. So thank you. I honor you. I appreciate you for being with us this evening. I would like to say in my closing thoughts and comments is that, first I want to acknowledge you are, in fact, I don't want to say how do I put this? You are the most senior guest I've had on a show.
That's cool.
I've done, I've been doing this now for coming up on a year and a half, and it's been an honor, and I'm humbled to have your presence today. I fell in love with you the first time we met, Sue, and I use those words in a very sincere way, because when I meet somebody and I hear the words, the language you speak, as you just described, there's an immediate connection. There's an immediate soul-to-soul connection. There's an immediate respect, because you can't fake it till you make it. We can see through that. You're not faking it. You're there. You're here, and I love that about you. And so I would absolutely look forward to having you back on the show. For those that are watching us live or in replay, if it is your weekend, put down that to-do list. You don't need it to define who you are or how good you are or how you're going to feel about yourself. I had that to-do list for my adult life for over 30 years, over 3 decades. And although I thought it's what I needed to feel better about myself, especially on Saturdays and Sundays, what I learned is that it actually holds me back from really discovering what is important. And what is important is not connecting with my to-do list, but connecting with myself. And so put the list down, take time, create time for yourself. Get out in nature, walk, hike, ride a bike. It's cold this time of year in Arizona, believe it or not. I'm wearing 2 layers of pants. I'm wearing 2 layers of shirts, a hoodie, gloves, and a beanie. I'm out there. The only thing that stops me from being out in nature is when it's raining. But other than that, I get out even when it's cold, because I know that although I may be cold outside, when I get out in nature, I warm up inside. I warm up at the soul level. And so that's what I would like to encourage you to do, inspire you. Get out, put the music on, dance, sing, pray, meditate, write, read, Do something for yourself that starts to give you permission to feel better about yourself. And through that process, if you stay with it 7 days in a row and then make it 14 and then 21, get up to 30 and your life will be changed in 30 days. How do I know that? Because that's what I had to do. And once I started to have that experience, oh, there was no going back. Even though ego tells me, take a day off, you don't need it. Just get to work. You got a lot of things to do today, Jay. I say, no, 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 ego. Thank you very much, but I got a better way to do this thing called life today. I'm going to live it. So get out and live your life. Get out and live your life. And through that process, you will get to experience what unconditional love can feel like for yourself. And then you'll be able to show up for other people outside of yourself and be able to be present for them and to connect. And with that, have an awesome weekend, what's left of it, Sue. And we'll catch you next time on Real People, Real Stories, Raw. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.